Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am here with Dete Shirley, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Dapper Labs, plus many more other really interesting things. Thanks so much for being with me here today.
It's really great to take the time to chat.
So let's start off first, Dete, and just getting some context here as to your background in the Web3 space, maybe starting from the very beginning, your first experience with the world of crypto. Bring us back to the early days.
Well, it was the early days. I think it was 2010. A friend of mine, a coworker of mine, sent me a copy of Satoshi's white paper and said, "Hey, you might find this interesting." and I looked at it and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a fascinating type of technology. I downloaded the software. I ran a crypto miner. There was no hardware miners or even GPU miners in those days. It was just, C software you compile for whatever computer you had and run it. And I did. And it was an interesting project. And I spent, I don't know, maybe 3 months, kind of obsessed with the idea. Right. And then I just, moved on to the next thing. It's sort of my modus operandi is sort of to get obsessed with things for a period of time and going on. And the reason I moved on was because the financial aspects, right? The idea of a currency independent of governments, that wasn't a big deal to me. Like, I understand why people care about that. I understand why that is, especially people who have lived under, despotic or unreliable governments. Yeah. Why that's something that's really important to them. But I grew up in Canada, right? Like, I've lost more money in my couch cushions than like the bank or the government has stolen from me. So, it didn't really bother me. I didn't have the same motivations that I think a lot of people who were brought into the crypto days, early crypto days. But I mined 50 Bitcoins. And that was, in all of the forums where the Bitcoin people talked, like they would try and set up trades for about 10 cents a Bitcoin. Yeah. And so, that was not a great investment in my time or electricity, but it was fun and interesting, and I learned a lot.
So were you like a college kid at this point?
Oh no, I was professional. So I graduated in 1996. I graduated university in 96. Yeah.
You look a lot younger.
I'm 48.
So did you sell your Bitcoin?
I sold half of it at $100. So it got up to $100. And I was like, whoa, like $5,000, like, wow, of like just free money. And so I sold half of it. Yeah. And then in about 2013, it was actually, that was the year I joined Axiom Zen. Okay. And there was a big Bitcoin bull rush that year. And it went up to about $1,000, I think $1,400 or something like that. And so I was like, man, like I'm going to sell some more. But then I thought to myself, well, how do I come up with some rational way to deal with selling this stuff? So I actually built a spreadsheet, and every time Bitcoin doubles, I sell a little bit more. I've got this like plan that I made in 2013.
You're still following it?
And I'm still following it. Yeah.
It's amazing. What forethought?
So I'm selling a little bit every time it doubles. So the next benchmark is when it hits 100K. And I do it in Canadian dollars, so we got real close.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's going to be a while now, it seems like.
So you joined Axiom Zen in 2013. Maybe paint us a picture of Axiom Zen and their relationship with Dapper Labs and how that all looks.
Yeah, I mean, Axiom Zen is a startup that builds startups. I mean, I guess it's not a startup so much anymore. It was formed at the beginning of 2013. But the whole idea of that company was that most startups, right, you get together some smart people with a clever idea and they try and build a product. And maybe they succeed, maybe they don't. If they succeed, we all know what that story looks like. If they don't, right, like mostly that story is, at best, you get an acqui-hire, right? Like if you get some investors, you get an acqui-hire, and then you all go and work for Google for a few years. Yeah. And the founder of Axiom Zen, Roham Garagoslu, who's my co-founder in Dapper Labs, didn't like that model, and is like, if you have smart people, right? Like, he was an investor himself. He worked for an investment firm, and he knew you invested in teams as much as product ideas. Yeah. And so it was so hard to find a good team to invest in. Yeah. Why would you give up on that team after just one idea? Surely those people could come up with another idea. Yeah. And we call it a pivot, but it does happen. But his idea was much more grand. Like, let's hire the right people, people who any startup would want to have on their staff, tech startup, and let's just try idea after idea, dozens of ideas, without having to kowtow to investors. So it was completely bootstrapped. We self-funded with doing contracts and joint development with various companies. And then we did a bunch of just crazy, wacky startup ideas. And as of today, there's been 3 companies spun out of Axiom Zen successfully. One is Routific, which is they're all based here in Vancouver. Routific, which is a vehicle routing company for small businesses, right? If you have doing a delivery and you want to know how to route your trucks to minimize the travel time. That's software that didn't exist for smaller companies. And then we have ZenHub, which is a project management tool that built right into GitHub, and really had added just a bunch of great features on top of GitHub, and many of which GitHub is since copied. But of course, the ZenHub team keeps moving ahead of them as well. And then of course, Dapper Labs was the third one.
Right. And you're and you were part of the founding team of Dapper Labs?
Yeah. So what happened with Dapper Labs was that it came out of a project, Cryptokitties, which I think maybe anybody who was around in 2017 probably would have heard of.
Yeah. So can you tell us about Cryptokitties? Because that's important.
Yeah. So in the summer of 2017, Ethereum was sort of in the news. Now, it was mostly in the news with ICOs and people promising to build crazy things, but selling tokens instead of actually building those things. And of course, I think many of those teams intended to build those things, but unfortunately, here we are, 5 years later, and many of those teams haven't built those things. But and I got really excited. So I had, as I said, I had gotten excited in this Bitcoin technology, and but the money thing wasn't that interesting to me, right? An independent form of money didn't excite me. It didn't ignite my imagination. Ethereum, though, was a computer, right? And here was a kind of computer that you could program, right? They call them smart contracts. They're neither smart nor contracts, but they are programs that run on this, completely autonomous, independent machine. And even the programmer who wrote that code and uploaded that code has to follow the rules of that code once it's been deployed. And that absolutely ignited my imagination. And so in 2017, once I had done a bunch of research into Ethereum and saw this, I just sort of, my mind, I just saw a peak, right, as to what might be possible because this thing was programmable. I went to Roham and some other senior folks at Axiom Zen, and I said, we should try and do something in this space. And so we spent, I think it was the month of June, we spent sort of the whole month of June just brainstorming ideas. What could you build? And we talked to people in the real estate industry. We talked to people in the mining, literally digging rocks out of the ground, mining industry. Because there's lots of, the way the finances work in that world are wild, right? People building mines don't have the money to do all this stuff, and they don't have the equipment, and there's so many contingency contracts, right? You get a cut of this if we find something, right? Or we'll pay you later. And so smart contracts and escrow, automatic escrow, seemed like it would be a really useful, for that industry. And then, but anyway, so then one of my coworkers, Mac Flavel, came to me and said, Dieter, we're going to put cats on the blockchain. And I said, Mac, what does that even mean? He's like, I don't know yet, but the internet loves cats, and we should do it. And it's it was one of those brainworms, right? It's well, what does it mean, cats on the blockchain? And so when we got to that end of that month, the project we ended up putting the company's energy behind was Cryptokitties. We came up with that name, Cryptokitties. And I spent a bunch of time doing, I guess you call it game design, figuring out why it would be fun, right? Because we could do, CryptoPunks existed at this time.
Okay, so NFTs existed.
No one called them that.
Okay.
So there were CryptoPunks, which existed, and then there were a few other projects on what people would now call sort of semi-fungible tokens, where it was sort of like cards. So imagine a trading card without a serial number, right? Where if you have two of them, they're fungible amongst themselves, right? If you have two of the same card, right? If you have two baseball cards same player, same year, same condition. Those are functionally fungible.
Yeah.
And so that form of digital collectibles we would now call them semi-fungible tokens, but that existed back on Bitcoin using something called colored coins. Okay. But no one referred to them as semi-fungible tokens. No one referred to them as non-fungible tokens. The term colored coins was frequently used. But like CryptoPunks were just punks. Like there was nothing in the CryptoPunks smart contract and any of their public thing that intended it to be anything beyond just this one project.
Okay.
It wasn't one instance of an idea. It was its own idea standing on its own.
Yeah.
And so when we decided to make CryptoKitties, I had seen CryptoPunks and I was like, well, it'll be more fun if you can do something with these cats. And that's where the breeding game came from. Okay. And so I designed that breeding game. It was tough because you had to like fit the algorithm to breed the cats into the smart contract programming language.
Right.
And the Ethereum network, it's about as powerful as like an Apple II computer from the 80s. Like that, even though it's using all this electricity for the proof of work and securing the blockchain, the smart contract execution layer is actually very computationally weak. It can't do very much. Okay. Now, most of the time, if you're just moving tokens from point A to point B, it doesn't need to do very much. Yeah. But with CryptoKitties, we were actually starting to actually using that computation, taxing the computation effort. And so we were working on CryptoKitties, and whenever we tell somebody, either inside the company or advisors from outside the company, they'd always ask if it was ERC20 compatible.
Right.
And I'd always get frustrated because the whole point of CryptoKitties was that every cat was different. And the way ERC20 was constructed, it was fundamentally a standard for something that's fungible, where
for tokens.
It only matters how many you have. Right. Like, there's no way in ERC20 to track individual tokens, right? Any more than like in your bank account, like which is, if you have $10 in your bank account, is that two $5 bills or one $10? No, in your bank account, it's totally fungible. Yeah. And that's how ERC20 worked. And so I kept getting frustrated by this question. And then one day it hit me. I'm like, well, why shouldn't there be a standard for things like CryptoKitties, right? Yeah. We'd seen CryptoPunks, right? Yeah. We'd seen something a little similar with like rare Pepes and what was happening with colored coins on Bitcoin. But on Ethereum, it seemed like there was an opportunity for a lot of creativity in this area. And so I created an Ethereum improvement proposal, EIP, called EIP 721. Yeah. And I proposed an ERC, an Ethereum, I don't know what ERC stands for.
Requisition?
I don't even know now that I think about it. I proposed something called ERC 721, which would be the equivalent of ERC 20, but for non-fungible tokens. Okay. Now, that phrase, non-fungible tokens, no one was using it. It wasn't like a concept. Right. And so I was like, what the heck should I call these things? Yeah. And what's funny is that in the real world, most things aren't fungible. Right. Right. You're not fungible. Your kids aren't fungible. Your car isn't fungible. Right. Yeah. Like fungibility is the exception, not the rule. Yeah. And so coming up with a term that means a thing that isn't fungible is really hard. Yeah. And like I went into the dictionary and it was like object or thing, right? Like that's the word we use in the real world to refer to things that aren't fungible. It's just like everything. Yeah. And so because I wanted to emphasize that these were tokens, and because there are people in the community that proposed the term deed, because a lot of people saw the use case of this as representing ownership of something that actually lived off chain. Okay. So, for example, you could imagine using one of these ERC 721 objects to represent ownership of a house, or ownership of a car or a piece of art. Yeah. And I was like, yes, I want people to have that use case, but I also want there to be the use case, because again, CryptoKitties is in my brain, where the token is the thing, right? Where the thing on the chain is what you own. Okay. And the best word I knew of to represent, like that people had accepted as it only lives on the chain, it's real because it lives on the chain, not it's representing something on the off chain, on chain, right? Like it's not, usually when we write software, we represent a copy of the real world, right? Like Like if you have, your employee list, right? It's in the computer, it's in a spreadsheet, but those aren't your employees. That's a reference. It's a copy. It's their names.
Yeah.
It's a copy of their names.
Yeah.
It's a copy of their titles, but they live somewhere else.
Yeah.
Tokens like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like ERC20 tokens, the reality of those is in the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was magical about them. And so I felt like it was important to use that word token, but then I had to differentiate them from the other tokens.
Course.
And so I went with non-fungible token, and no one else thought that was a good idea. Like, seems like nope, nobody knows what fungible is, and now you're defining this thing as what it's not, using a term that no one knows what it is.
And still today, this is a global mystery. What does non-fungible mean? How many articles business magazines have written about this topic?
Exactly, and so I decided, well, at least I can make it easier to swallow by just using the phrase NFT, like the initialism. Yeah. And so I very carefully wrote the word like non-fungible token once at the beginning of ERC 721. I put NFT in parentheses, and then I was really careful to use NFT everywhere else.
So that was quite intentional for you.
Absolutely. It was sort of like, look, if I just call it non-fungible token everywhere, people will reject that term.
Yeah.
And then we'll be in this, like, we're just going to end up in this like bike shedding argument, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
No, what does that mean?
So this is a total aside. So the idea of bike shedding is when a decision is hard, people are cautious to give opinions.
Okay, yeah.
But when a decision is easy and doesn't matter, everyone has an opinion.
Okay.
And the canonical example of this is that, like, if we're building a dam, right? You're not going to tell, and you're part of the board that's approving this dam. You're not going to ask questions about, like, which turbines they're using. Like, you're going to leave that to the engineers.
Yeah.
But if you're part of the same requisition committee and you're asked to build a bike shed, right? Suddenly you have an opinion, right? You care about the color of that thing. You care about the shape of that thing. Should it be on the west side of the building or the east side of the building? Right. And so bike shedding is the tendency of decisions to take up more time the less important they are.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think it's an important concept in business. We use it in software all the time. And so I was worried that if there wasn't a terminology that people were willing to accept quickly, that it would just end up being a discussion about what word we use rather than how these things work and what how they should be represented on chain. Yeah. And so I very explicitly said these are non-fungible tokens. I used NFT, and I hoped NFT would stick. Yeah. And yeah,
it did. Boy, did you ever imagine that we would be in kind of people selling NFTs for millions of dollars, and that it would be where it is today, that it would be like a global topic that nearly every organization is grappling with?
So if you had asked me, right, like this idea NFT, what's the, like, if it becomes a big deal, what would that look like? Right. I would have assumed that it would have been an implementation detail behind certain things that people might have heard of, but not think of as important in and of itself, right? So, like the term packet in the notion of internet networking, right? Yeah. Everyone's heard of the word packet, right? Most people don't know what that means, but they're like, oh yeah, the packets. Yeah, there's packets, right? I would have expected NFT to be like in its wildest dreams, right? Like that a level of awareness where everyone knows that such a thing exists. Yeah. But where most people don't interact with it directly, where it's like it's an implementation detail that most people don't really appreciate. Okay. The idea that NFTs and Cryptokitties included would end up being worth sort of, 7-8 figures. I probably would have said maybe in like a very long time. Right. Like you can imagine sort of 20 years from now, 30 years from now, people look back and say, oh, that was an important, like in retrospect, that was an important piece of art. In retrospect, that was an important step in technology. And now I'm going to spend $10 million on it. If you had told me that people would have spent millions of dollars or 10 plus $million on assets sort of within 6 months of their being released, I don't know if I would have believed you. We priced CryptoKitty number 1, the very first CryptoKitty, at I think it was about $300,000. And we had the way we priced CryptoKitties because we had no idea how these things should be priced, right?
Yeah.
And so we did everything as a Dutch auction. And so we would set a price, and then we would have a countdown clock. And in the case of those first 1,000 kitties, 100 kitties that we called the founder kitties, we would set a starting price, and then it would go down over, I think it was 6 months. It was quite a long time period.
And the price would drop.
Then the price would drop, right? And it was linear.
So in 6 months, it would have been free.
In 6 months, it would have been free if no one had bought it that whole time. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so after 3 months, it was going to be $150,000 and so on. And so we sort of imagined that it would be like 2 or 3 months before someone bought that thing. Right. And so it was, and people thought I was being really aggressive, right? Like we should make it $300,000, right? And everyone's like, no, no one's going to pay that much. And I'm like, that's fine. They don't have to, right? Yeah. But the longer it stays unsold, the like more interesting it becomes in its own way, right? Yeah. And so eventually that rising interest and the falling price, they will intersect. Yeah. It sold in the first week.
So tell us about the moment in time where CryptoKitties broke Ethereum. Is broke the right term? Stalled it out, slowed it down?
I'm sure there are other people who would object to the term broken, but that's the word I use.
Okay, let's go for that.
And I say absolutely it was broken because it was unusable for most people during that time. So it was literally the week we launched, right? So we launched on, I can't remember what day of the week it was, but within 2 days, we were seriously constraining the Ethereum network. And then for a full 7 to 10 days after that, the network was virtually unusable for us or anyone else.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And I mean, it's just the nature of the computer, right? I said it was no more powerful than an Apple II computer from like in 1984, right? Yeah. And it's like, what's funny is that didn't even occur to us as a risk. Right. Of all the risks that we sort of like, oh, what if no one what if no one is interested in this? What if no one plays it? What if it's not fun because it's fun because you trade with other players and there are no other players? Like, how do we bootstrap that? We really worried about that a lot. We never once thought to ourselves, what if it's so popular that the network isn't able to keep up with the demand?
Right.
And the reality is that the demand was high, but the drop off in our funnel was hilariously high, right? Like you want to talk about onboarding friction, right? Like you read about CryptoKitties in the New York Times, you go to cryptokitties.co, you are asked to install a browser plugin, right? MetaMask. You then have to go to something like Coinbase and buy cryptocurrency, which requires you typically to go through KYC, upload a picture of you holding your credit card, or sorry, your
driver's license,
or your passport, and then and only then can you play the cat game, right? So obviously our funnel was leaky, right? But we still were managed to overwhelm the network because the network was 1,000,000 times less powerful than I would have ever anticipated. Now remember, leading up to this was the ICO craze, right? All through 2017, people were raising tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, promising to completely transform various industries, all built on this blockchain, Ethereum. Yeah. And so the idea that our cat game was gonna wreck this network was like not even on the radar.
I guess it's kind of laughable, really.
It's absurd. We had 10,000 DAUs, and we were using up more than a third of the capacity of the network.
What's a DAU?
Oh, sorry, daily active users.
Thank you. So then, how does this lead you, the breaking of Ethereum, into things like, maybe we can kind of angle into like Topshot and Flow Blockchain and some of the other things that you've done at Dapper?
Sure. So CryptoKitties caught everybody by surprise, us, the industry, the investors. And so a bunch of investors got in touch with us. They're like, hey, you guys have shown that there's like a consumer angle to this technology, right? Like everyone has sort of understood the financial aspects of it, the stuff that hadn't interested me to begin with. Yeah. And now here was something that was like consumer oriented, entertainment oriented. And that was like a whole new aspect of this technology. So everyone was very excited about what we were doing. So we did a fundraise. We spun out this company, Dapper Labs. Roham and I as co-founders. We, Axiom Zen kept a chunk of the company in exchange for putting all the people and the technology, the IP in there. Yeah. And so all of the IP associated with CryptoKitties, all the people who built CryptoKitties were now part of Dapper Labs officially. And so my first job as CTO was, okay, we're going to build entertainment technology for a consumer audience. We're going to bring 1 billion people to blockchain.
Yeah.
Well, we just had a blockchain that broke with 10,000 people.
Right.
So what are we going to do with 1 billion?
Right.
So question number one was, what are we going to build it on? Because it ain't going to be Ethereum.
Right.
And I spent 3 months with, I had a couple engineers, I had a product manager, and we spent 3 months investigating all of these different proposals for blockchains. And we got to the end of it and we're like, I don't want to build on any of these. These ones I don't trust. These ones I'm not sure they're going to scale. These ones aren't, it's hard to build on them. They're not designed with the idea that people will build complex software on them. They're baking in the assumption that programs are going to be simple and not complex. And we had already, even with Cryptokitties, which is a very simple algorithm, the complexity was causing problems. And no one was building a blockchain where they're like, yes, we're going to handle that complexity for you. We're going to be able to build complex software and build interesting applications on this. And so we got to the end of it and we're like, well, shoot, there's no good answers here. And so the good news is that I had the knowledge in front of me. I had a product person, I had 3 engineers and myself, and between us, we probably read 100 white papers for various blockchains and blockchain layer 2s and all these different proposals. We'd talked to probably more than 20 teams who were proposing or building blockchains at that time. And so just our brains were filled with sort of the best thinking about how a blockchain could work. And so I said, well, let's not give up. Can we do better? Yeah. Is there a solution to this? Can we solve this in a way that other people haven't? And that's where Flow came from. Okay. And we realized that we could build a blockchain that preserved the notion of decentralization, made sure that the platform, the protocol itself, was highly resistant to capture, right? Whether by corporate capture or government capture, that it was highly performant and could be a satisfying environment for more complex software to be built on it.
Wow. And so how has the marketplace reacted to Flow since inception?
I mean, the people who, it's a noisy market. We as a company don't like to, our mission is to create value for people, not to make number go up, right? There's sort of a mindset in the crypto industry that it's all about speculation. It's all about these tokens, the fungible tokens. It's all about money, making money and whatnot. No, I want people to make money, but I want people to create end user value, right? Okay. I want them to create end user value and and make money doing so, not literally making money as in printing a new token and hoping to convince other people that it has value. The problem is that in an industry where everyone else is saying, hey, come over here, I've got free money. Yeah. And we're saying, hey, come over here. If you put in a lot of hard work and create a lot of user value, you can change the world. Right. That is appealing to some people, but it's not as viral a message as come over here and we've got a bunch of free money to give you. Okay. And so, so I'm honestly a little disappointed at the number of people who have really looked into Flow's technology and understood what we're proposing here. Yeah. But boy, oh boy, the people who have love it. Right. Anybody who is coming in fresh, either doesn't have a blockchain background, they come in and they read our documentation and they read it, see how it works. They just make sense to them. And then, if they go and look at another blockchain, they're like, well, what the heck is going on over there? Yeah. Even better are the people who are coming from other blockchains and if they understand, if they're an engineer or a product person who understands the real actual challenges of building an application from from zero to release, they love what we're doing on Flow. They love what we're doing with Dapper Wallet. But for the people who really want to do something quick and get into the market as quickly as possible, doing as little work as possible, we don't have as good a story. And so I'm mostly happy with that, but it does mean that I don't think we get necessarily the attention we deserve. And I think
Right.
we need to do a lot better marketing and,
Okay.
and outreach for that reason.
So let me ask you kind of about the speculation. You strike me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of the speculative aspect of crypto is not what you're interested in. You're interested in adding true value. I mean, speculation in crypto is really at the heart of what a lot of people are in it for. I would say, flipping NFTs or whatever, whatever that looks like for them. And you, as kind of the creator of the first mainstream NFT, the term, all this kind of stuff. How do you feel about the state of the marketplace today? When there's so many young YouTubers that are like, flip this NFT and buy pump and dump this and Moon Boys and all this kind of stuff. How do you feel about the current state of where we're at?
Oh, I think it's very counterproductive. I think that we know that as humans, we find value in surrounding ourselves with things that we feel like reflect our personality, and help the world understand who we are.
Yeah.
Right. Whether that's a poster on the wall, a T-shirt, or the car you drive. Right. These are all decisions, and we're used to paying a premium to signal in that way.
Yeah.
And when you look at a game like Fortnite, where is one of the biggest money makers in the gaming industry right now, and all they sell is cosmetics.
Right.
All they're selling is fashion. All they're selling is a place to hang out and demonstrate through the things that you've selected, either paid for or free, that represent your personality.
Yeah.
So the idea that people won't get real lasting value out of digital ownership of purely digital assets is, like, to me, it's obvious. Of course that's going to happen, sure. Right? Like, people care about things, and they care about how other people perceive them, and digital fits right in with that.
Yeah.
I have long said internally to our team, when we were building Cryptokitties, when we were building NBA Topshot, when we're looking at any other products, I'm always telling the team, if the majority of our users aren't buying the item because owning that thing has value to them, because they're a basketball fan, because they're a football fan, because they're a fan of that particular player, if the ownership of the thing itself is not valuable, but because they think they can sell it on to somebody else, we're wrecked, right? Because that is an unsustainable trend.
Yeah.
There is no world in which people think they're going to sell it to somebody. Like, if the only drive is I'm going to sell it to somebody else. Now, can a fraction of people have that speculative mindset? Of course, right? And that can even provide a service to a community where, like, the person selling it might not want to wait until the person who's ready to buy it is ready to buy it.
Right.
And that person who comes in the middle and provides that liquidity can be very valuable. And so it's absolutely healthy for a small percentage, or a minority, it doesn't have to be super small, of the people to have some amount of speculation involved. But if it's not the driving force of your economy, then it's just never going to be able to be sustained.
Where do you see the future of NFTs beyond, profile pictures, art, maybe collectibles? Because I think that's probably where we are. That's, I think, where most NFTs are today, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. But where do you see the future going beyond kind of the way that we see it today?
So I think NFTs as collectibles and art will continue to exist. And I think that collectively it can be a very big market, many hundreds of millions of dollars, but maybe individual NFTs won't be quite as much. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to continue to be a big deal, because, again, like, we've seen that, right? People like art, people like collectibles, people like T-shirts. So why shouldn't they like digital collectibles? Right. The two areas where I think that are most fruitful are, one, what I call sort of active or dynamic NFTs, where the NFT has some on-chain behavior that is by itself fun, right? And we did that with Cryptokitties. Cryptokitties, you have two cats, you breed them together, you get another cat. What does that cat look like? It's fun. It's interesting, right? And was it a perfect experience, a perfect game? No, but I think like it was designed to last for a year. And I think for that year, we had an amazing community of people who had a lot of fun playing this game where they were discovering all of these various gene combinations and unlocking new kinds of cats. And I think that's really interesting. And I think you can take that way further. And you know, I'm working with a team right now who's trying to build a game where it's an actual interactive game where I go and I buy my game pieces and then I challenge you to a game and we play a game. And if you look at something like, you know, Magic the Gathering, right? There's a digital version of Magic the Gathering, right? There's multiple digital versions of it. And people buy the digital assets and they play games against each other. And they don't expect to make money reselling those assets on because it's fun to play games with other people. So I think that's a huge area that needs to be opened up and explored, and I believe will be in the next couple of years. The other one is just using NFTs as a representation of the kind of ownership that in the past we would use like a card, like a membership card or a subscription card or something like that. I think the idea that I have an NFT that represents that I went to such and such a concert, and because I have that from 10 different concerts, I get special treatment from the artist, right? Maybe I get to buy, I get invited to a smaller venue concert, where it's like a ticket stub, but it has utility, right? We use that term utility, but it's not necessarily on chain, right? And we're exploring this quite a bit with Topshot, right? Finding, you know, people who have, you know, you have a giant Lakers collection. We'll enter you into potentially enter you into a contest where you could win a seat to a Lakers game, or a Lakers jersey. And it's sort of, you know, that I think is another really rich area where the NFT itself is just a representation of something else that's happening somewhere else.
So it's giving you access to something. Exactly. Okay, great. I want to maybe end on one question. What is the metaverse? And where, I don't know, maybe you can take that any way you want. What is the metaverse and where is the future of the metaverse? What does that look like to us?
I mean, I think you ask 10 people what the metaverse is, you get 10 different answers.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mostly reject answering that question. I think the information superhighway was a term used in the early days of the internet to refer to the web. I wonder if metaverse is going to be one of those words where like it's cool for a couple of years and makes it on the front of a magazine, and then everyone forgets about it for a while. Who knows? Then the name might stick, but I think the fundamental idea is that we know right now today that we are on the verge of creating a new kind of digital presence that goes beyond like video chat. Now, usually people associate this with like VR goggles and whatnot, and maybe it is that. But the idea is that it's removing the barrier that exists between you and me when we're talking on video. That when I'm talking to you on a video, there's a screen. It feels like to our monkey brains, it's like there's a piece of glass between you and me. I can only see you from one angle. I can't, we're not in a space together. We're definitely separated. And yes, we can communicate and that can be very effective, but we're definitely separated. And it's trying to get rid of that separation, right? And obviously VR technology is a big part of that. I believe that once we have that place, that it will be a place where we can hang out. And, with our friends, both local and distant. And I think that's pretty interesting. And the only thing that I really bring to this conversation, I think everything that I just said is most people who sort of talk about the metaverse would agree with those things, and they're pretty broad. The only thing I bring into this is that I think that a second place where we all go to hang out and we have a bunch of stuff, right? Digital items
Yeah.
that sort of represent our personality that we're used to personalize that space. If that is all owned by one company, that sounds terrible. And so will the way we understand a blockchain today, does that solve all those problems? No, it doesn't. But if we don't find a way to build those systems such that they are somewhat decentralized, federated, interoperable something, it's a terrible, that's just a dystopia to me. We end up becoming prisoners of that space rather than it being a new place for us to be who we want to be. And so I am hopeful that some of the technology we're building will be like some of the bricks in the foundation of a metaverse or a second space where we can interact with each other that is truly open and is opt-in rather than lock-in.
Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. Dete, it's been an awesome conversation. This is super interesting. I feel like we could go for a long, long time. At least I could listen to you for a long, long time. I really appreciate you spending some time with us here today, hearing about kind of the foundations of NFTs, ERC 721, whatever ERC stands for. I mean, this is something we're going to have to look up, and learning and understanding Cryptokitties and the foundations of Flow Blockchain has been really, really interesting. I really appreciate you coming in. This has been great conversation. Thanks so much.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you.